Reddit, what's your best funniest personal example of petty revenge? Story 1. I had a guy in school who would always skip class and then ask for my notes. We had a group project worth almost 40% of our grade once, and he did zero work. When the professor told me, tough luck, instead of just saying no, the next time he asked for notes, I took the low road. I began giving him edited versions. I would leave items out of lists, incorrectly define things, or just straight up write stuff that made no sense. For example, in the section about calculating return on investment, I wrote, subtract your yearly earnings from your current bank balance, then multiply by Azure's factorial or 0.22. If he had even bothered to crack the text, he would have figured it out, but apparently, that would have been too much effort for him. He ended up retaking that class. Story 2. I have two stories with the previous landlord property management company. I signed a lease on a townhouse while in college that included high-speed internet. The setup was basically one lousy router for 14 townhouses, so about 28 people. Needless to say, the internet was terrible, and the location of our unit made it even worse. We made some calls to try and get them to add a router or hardwire us in so we could add our own, but no dice. Eventually, I paid to get my own service and added 2 routers to our unit. I changed the SSID to match what the free router was, and I kept the passwords the same. So, to the residents, it looked like there was better coverage. After about 2 weeks, I changed one router's password and just disconnected the other. So, some residents could use the free router, some had a bad password, and some could connect but couldn't reach the outside world. They must have been flooded with calls because within 24 hours, they had someone out and added 3 new routers to help with coverage. The other story happened after a huge snowfall of about 24 inches in 24 hours. The property management company hadn't touched the snow in our parking lot for days. After day 3, I called to mention that we were sort of trapped and they needed to send trucks and snow blowers, etc., to take care of things. The response I got was basically, sorry, we'll get to it sooner or later. Side note, years ago, if you opened a Yahoo email, you could add a second email for recovery without confirming it. So, I created a new Yahoo email address and used their general at property management as the alternate email. I had to copy every email to both. I then signed up for alerts every time there was an eBay listing for snowplows, snow blowers, shovels, or when there was a sale on snow removal gear. It took a matter of hours before thousands of emails were sent, and it ended up crashing their email server. They responded to all residents with a very nice email explaining that they understood the frustration and that they were working on it. So, I paused the alerts. 24 hours later, still nothing. Alerts back on. Another email. Another pause. Another day of nothing. Repeat. Eventually, we got the driveway plowed, and life was good. Story 3. Okay, so this one is not easy to understand, so let me explain first. There is something about Chinese Shanghai culture. Old Chinese people think that it's really shameful to have a son near 30 who is still not married because it means that you are not a good parent for not having found a good bride for your son, or you are too poor to afford marriage, or your son is ugly. People won't care if someone doesn't want to have a family or what, anyway, they're going to speak ill about you and your family. The pressure is pretty high, and everyone tends to want a grandchild, preferably male, as soon as possible. My mother got sick 5 years ago. In China, we are immigrants, so she doesn't have insurance there. Her treatment cost over $30,000, and we went broke. Since her aunts and uncles still owed her some money, she asked for it back, but guess what? They denied it and left her sick, waiting for death because they didn't need the friendship of someone who was broke. I had to quit school and work to help her, and that was the reason for my poor English. After 4 years, she was cured, and I got myself a family. I had 2 sons and bought a house with the help of my in-laws. Everything turned out just fine. Last year, I took my sons to China to visit all of them, as tradition says, and they gave me red pocket money for my sons with a sour face. I asked my mom why, and she told me that her aunt and uncle's sons are still single, all of them, while I have not 1 but 2 children. I spent the whole night pointing out how wonderful it is to have children. Sorry, not a funny story. Story 4. This happened to my partner when he was at university. Another comment here reminded me of it. His class was doing presentations and he got paired with some girl who didn't bother to bring notes or research information for their presentation. She instead let him do all the work, and any slides she did were made from his notes and research. He complained to his tutor, and she told him, "Don't worry, leave it to me." Then the day of the presentation comes. They present, and then, at the end, the tutor asks the girl a question. If I remember correctly, the question was something like, is there any evidence to suggest that some cultures are more prone to mental health problems? The girl answered, no. The tutor then asked my partner the same exact question, and because he'd actually read the research on the topic, he was able to list several studies that showed that some cultures are, in fact, more prone to mental health issues. The girl glared at him the entire time he answered the tutor's question. Pretty sure she ended up with a D while he got an A or at least a B. Story 5. This dude in my accounting class in high school used to ask me for answers to questions only to spout them to the teacher, thereby looking like a genius and getting credit for my work. One day, our teacher comes into class with a pierced tongue and is talking sort of funny. Terry, as his name is, proceeds to use it as a point of conversation. Hey miss, do you have any other piercings like your ear? She responds, thinking he's making an inane conversation, would you get your nose pierced? He keeps asking, just to prolong the time before class starts. As usual, he leans over asking for help. What are some other good things to ask her? I was annoyed that he always asked for my help to benefit him, so I thought I'd have some fun. I blurted out, ask if she's going to get her labia pierced. The class fell silent. The girl said, oh, sorry, it just means eyebrow. That's like the piercing name for it, like how a tragus is that nose piercing. Terry goes, yeah, oh cool. Hey miss, are you going to get your labia pierced next? Every girl, and especially the teacher in the class, looked at him like he was trash. And he tried blaming me, but I brushed it off gracefully. Story 6. My mom, who was a fantastic language teacher at my high school, had an incredible revenge story. Years after I had graduated, she called me upset because a group of guys was trying to make her look dumb. The class had an assignment to write a team dialogue in Spanish, which they had a week to prepare and perform in front of the class. When she called for their performance, they claimed they had already done it and refused to do it again. Feeling puzzled and questioning herself, my mom received a tip from one of the good kids in the class. They revealed that the guys were bragging about making her look stupid and had threatened the whole class not to say anything. These guys were stereotypical dumb jock types who everyone was scared of for some reason. My mom, who was really into yoga at the time, came up with a brilliant plan. The next day, she went in and apologized to the boys, claiming that she found her notes on their presentation and remembered it. She pretended to be forgetful and described all the grammatical mistakes they made, the insufficient length of their dialogue, and their failure to include necessary vocabulary. It was all made up, of course. As a result, she failed them all on the project, and they couldn't do a thing about it without admitting they had made it all up. It was a satisfying revenge that left them unable to challenge her without revealing their deception. Story 7. When I was a kid, I had a bedwetting problem, and my younger brother started telling other kids at school how extensive the issue was. I was mortified, even after our mother told him to knock it off, he continued. So, I decided to level the playing field. The old hand in a cup of warm water trick didn't work, so one night, I stood over him as he slept and peed on him. The next morning, my mom was horrified and ended up taking a call from my grandmother, exclaiming, I don't know what to do now, both of them are pissing the bed. After a few more times of framing my brother as a bedwetter, he completely stopped using my embarrassing problem as entertainment. It was a funny revenge that made him realize the consequences of his actions. Story 8. Back in college, I was sitting in the library, trying to work on an assignment. I had been quiet for a while until this obnoxious guy came in and sat at a nearby table. He proceeded to have the loudest, most obnoxious conversation on his phone with a friend, saying things like bro and yada yada yada. I was about to pack up my things and find somewhere else to work when the conversation turned to Netflix. The guy told his friend to use his account and loudly stated his email address and password for everyone to hear. It was too good of an opportunity to pass up. I seized the chance and logged into his account. I navigated to the LGBT section and started adding the gayest movies I could find to the top of his queue. I like to think that both guys ended up thinking the other one added the movies to the queue, but they were too shocked to ever say anything to each other. It was a hilarious revenge that played out silently. Story 9. In 7th grade, I used to bring homemade lunch to school. We prepared our own salad dressing with lemon juice, salt, oil, etc. One kid decided it would be good to steal it and drink it before lunchtime. I asked him not to, but he continued to drink it, gulping it down so I couldn't stop him. Instead of making a huge deal, I decided to have some fun. I prepared 2 salad dressings, one that I would actually use in my salad and another that had all the liquid condiments I could find in my mom's kitchen. It was really fun to see his face as he drank it. He never stole my salad dressing again. Story 10. I worked in a fish factory most summers when I was in my teens, and there was a boy who also worked there one summer who was an awful bully. He targeted me and another girl, engaging in disgusting verbal bullying with racial undertones. The other girl was of mixed race. He would yell insults over the factory announcement system whenever he didn't have enough work to keep him busy. The foreman refused to get involved, so we took matters into our own hands. One day, we finished work before he did and spotted his dad's car actually, in the parking lot. We looked at each other, went back into the building, got several rolls of toilet paper and a packet of menstrual pads, and decorated the car with them. The car was seen by many of our coworkers, some of whom also witnessed us decorating it, and they cheered us on. Once he got out, he just stood there blushing, embarrassed, and wondering who could have done this to him. He was very subdued at work after that, and the bullying nearly stopped. I hope it made him realize what it felt like to be on the receiving end of it. The best part was that everyone, including his brother, knew who had done it, but no one told him. Story 11. As a nurse, we had this god-awful patient who made all of our lives hell. They constantly needed pain meds on the wanted to smoke every half hour, and sat on the call light all day. This person was possibly the rudest human being I'd ever met, treating us like slaves. When it came time for discharge, this patient decided to come up with a whole bunch of new medical problems to prolong their stay. Being the skilled and rational nurse that I am, I asked a doctor for a whole new set of orders. I requested lab draws every 3 hours, meaning needles every 3 hours to check cardiac markers. I asked that the patient be placed on NPO status, nothing by mouth, for nausea. This person couldn't go an hour without eating something. For the numbness, I requested strict bed rest for 24 hours and a physical therapy evaluation, which meant no more going downstairs to smoke. I explained all of this to the patient, and they said, I just wanted to stay another night. I ain't doing any of that. I feel fine. Just give me my damn papers. I talked it over with the doctor on call, and he gave me the all clear to discharge. I had him out the door in an hour. Story 12. I had a chief warrant officer in Iraq who threw a bottle of petroleum jelly at me after I got done ranting about something. I'd long since forgotten what it was. He told me to go take care of it and come back when I felt better during his afternoon siesta. I spent an hour covering everything on his desk with petroleum jelly in the most inconspicuous spots. For example, inside the handle of a coffee mug, underneath the handle of the Keurig pod loader, behind the canister holding the Keurig coffee pot, anywhere he could grab something without seeing it without first inspecting it. He came back and proceeded to curse at a rate never witnessed before as he continuously wiped all the jelly off his hands every 3 minutes. He even got the jelly on the inside rims of his over-the-ear headphones before he rubbed it on his ears. But the best part came after I let him calm down and get back to work. Everyone else in the office watched me do it. No one said a thing, but they all had their eyes on me as I waited 5 minutes before picking up my phone at my desk and slowly dialed the number at his desk. It rang, and everyone turned to look at him. He was on the computer, picks up the phone, slaps it to his ear, and says, Radio Battalion, SEMA, and then he turned his head. His ear was caked full of petroleum jelly. I had dumped it all over the earpiece of the phone. Master Guns and the Major told me these antics and pranks made that deployment. CW Orion, if you're reading this, sorry not sorry. Story 13. Back when I was a senior in high school around Christmas time, my parents allowed me to skip school to go buy Christmas gifts and save for the day. I had my license, so I was excited to just do my own thing. That day, I headed out to the mall in another town, and I was having one of those really good days. You know, the ones where, for no particular reason, you're just happy and floating through the day. It was sunny out, not too cold, just a perfect day. After I finished up at the mall, I figured I would treat myself. I got one of those big gulp Slurpees from 7-Eleven, the almost gallon-looking cup that barely fits into any cup holders, with the red shovel and straw of a Mountain Dew Code Red. Hell yes, this day was continuing to be awesome. I needed to cross a bridge to get over the big river in our area and onto the highway. The bridge had the outside lane closed. Midway through, I was in the inside lane and needed to get to the right turn lane at the end of the bridge before the closure. This lady in a nice BMW tries to speed up and cut in front of me before the lane closed. I was like, what the? This was dangerous as it was, with everyone following closely, so I didn't let her in. She slides in behind me, cutting off the person behind me. Whatever. I can see in my mirror that she's waving her arms around and upset. As I pull into the right turn lane, she pulls up next to me and rolls down her window. All I see are animated movements and someone yelling, so I roll down my window. This old lady isn't going to ruin my day. My initial plan is to just be overly nice to her. People in a fit hate it when you're super nice to them. But after I roll down my window, I hear her breaking into a tirade against teenage drivers. You kids should learn manners. You kids shouldn't be driving. I'll have you arrested. She was just being a mean woman because I wouldn't let her break the rules and cut everyone in line. So I had a moment of brilliance. I reach over, grab my fully filled and bright red Slurpee, and with my right arm, I sort of chuck it across my body. My initial plan was that it would hit her car door or something and spill everywhere on her paint, causing her to have to go have a car wash. What actually happened turned out better than I could have ever imagined. Now remember, she was leaning over into the passenger seat to yell at me. So as I chucked this tank of red sticky slushy out of my window, it didn't hit her car door or any part of the outside. Instead, it sailed perfectly into her open window and exploded when it hit the headrest of her passenger seat. I'm talking bright red slushy exploding all over that nice tan leather interior, windshield, and best of all, on her face. The look of utter shock and awe on her face was absolutely incredible. She went from one moment being rude, mean, and authoritative to suddenly being shocked and trying to process her situation. I simply said, "Merry Christmas," and drove away. Those were the only words I spoke to her. Afterward, I felt kind of bad. I mean, I didn't mean to throw it in her car but rather on it. That mess must have been a pain to get cleaned up. But after thinking about it a little more, I was very happy that it turned out the way it did.